Hello. Hey, everyone here at the Investing Stuff You Should Know podcast, where we bring you expert insights into the world of investing and beyond. My name is Johnny Nelson, and today we are thrilled to have Tony Stancato as our special guest. Tony, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Johnny. Excited to be here.
Amazing, man. So Tony is he is committed full time to the some people say Airbnb or more generally the SDR or the short term rental space. He had a background, a technical background in production and other things, and he can explain that. We're gonna get his insights into why he thought he could go from a probably a well paid professional job, taking care of the family. He's got kids, a wife, all that kind of stuff, and he committed. He was bold to the SDR space in an area where many think like, oh, it's too cold, it's too wet, it's not Florida, it's not the sunny beach of California, and he's killing it, he's crushing it. So Tony, thank you for being here. Give us a little bit of your background of where you grew up and where you kind of your professional background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the Cadillac, Michigan area. It's kind of a small town. And then once I turned 18, 19, moved down to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And for about 14, 15 years, I was in the manufacturing space, 12 of that being in Grand Rapids. And then I got an opportunity to work for Stryker Medical in Kalamazoo. So moved to Kalamazoo and put in a couple years at Stryker. But in the meantime, my neighbor in Grand Rapids, we had always talked about buying a short-term rental. And, so our thought was let's look for one. We wanted to travel hack. Let's look in Tennessee, Florida, the same place everybody else looks, right? And we were just looking at these numbers, and it just seemed like the home prices were all $500,000+. The projections that we were seeing, they were less than 100,000. And so you start running those and it's like, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we're like, you know what, let's just cut our teeth in our backyard. Let's start looking in, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids. Let's look for places on lakes, that kind of stuff. So started doing some digging, and my wife just sends us this property somewhere we've never even heard of, and it's called Stevensville, Michigan. And we're like, where is this? And we start looking, we run the numbers, and we're like, wow, that's incredible. That can't be right. It's not on the water or anything like that. And really cool. Had a sauna, a hot tub, cool fire, probably the best fire pit in Michigan.
Was it set up? Can I just interject here, Tony? Was it set up as a short-term rental, or was it just like
it was not? I mean, it was, but they weren't actually using it as a short-term rental. So they
an
had
undiscovered gem, almost all the
right.
amenities in that area that you would want as an FTR operator, but just not on the platform.
Absolutely. And it was under $400,000. And we're like, wow, this is incredible. If those numbers are right, like this could be a real opportunity. So there was 4 of us that bought it, me and my wife, my business partner and his wife, and we all went to the inspection. I was the only one that said, hey, let's not do it. But I got outvoted. So we decided to go with it. And so we closed mid-June, had it open for the July 4th weekend. And when we got started, we were like, hey, if we could get $500 a night, we'd just be to the moon. Our first booking came in at $1,000 a night for 3 nights. And we're like, wow, this is incredible. We're not on the lake, we're not on a river, anything like that. It's like literally a 1930s farmhouse with cheap laminate and, outdated kitchen in the middle of nowhere. And it was getting $1,000 a night. And we're like, wow, this is pretty awesome. So fast forward, I mean, our best night on that property ended up doing $1,650 a night for the weekend. And again,
that's astonishing.
So that first year, that first 6 months, we did 72,000 in gross at that property. And so we were like, oh wow, this is awesome. So we started looking at buying more. So we bought another one, and now we're kind of buying multifamilies and converting them into short-term rentals as well. And so fast forward, we have 9 doors. We've actually sold our single families because they didn't fit kind of our criteria we're looking to manage $100,000 properties or more.
You say 100,000, that means cash, like cash flow, right?
Gross rent.
Gross revenue. Okay, sorry.
Yep. So and we had some smaller ones, like a 2-bed, 1-bath. It just was never going to do $100,000 in rent. So we've sold those ones. Now we have 2 multifamily properties, and we manage another 12 doors from Saugatuck down to New Buffalo.
Amazing, man. Describe for the audience and myself, what is the region like there in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area there, or where you said Stevensville, I think. Just describe, like, is it like lakes and beautiful like pine or coniferous forest? Like, give us a little just a sense of that.
Yeah, so it's all lakeshore area, Lake Michigan, and I'll tell you, I post some pictures of the lake there. You would think you're in the Caribbean when you see those pictures. It's just phenomenal, and I'll tell you, I'm over there all the time, probably 3, 4 times a week. I'm about an hour away from the properties
Okay,
that we
yeah,
own or manage. I'm still discovering new beaches, and they just have some of the best beaches in the United States or even the world. So that's the big draw. We're 90 minutes, which I call the perfect vacation driving distance from the third biggest city in the United States, which is Chicago.
yeah.
So I would say 75% of our guests are from Chicago, and then Indianapolis and Detroit.
That's awesome, man. You told just to, and we're going to drill into this because this is, I want people to obviously just discover or realize the path you took. You're committed to your job, and then did you actually let me ask that question. Did you win and did you exit your full-time job?
So I did exit. So we owned 2 properties, and then we were onboarding 2 or 3 more at the same time to manage. And we made an offer to somebody else. We're like, hey, I can't be taking phone calls at work anymore and kind of doing this. It just didn't seem right, right? So it's like something's got to give. So we made an offer to somebody to join the team full time, and they declined the offer. So I was like, hey, I guess next man up. So decided at that time, it was March of last year, that I put in my notice. It's supposed to be like a 30-day notice. Takes them a while to backfill, but as of June, like June 10th or something, they still hadn't backfilled. So I actually said, hey, all right, I got to leave, and went down to the short-term rental conference down in Nashville. So
I bet that was awesome, man. So you just dropped a bunch of incredible information. So where I was going with that, and you just confirmed, was you had enough revenue, and maybe it wasn't your first choice. You saw the potential of revenue to exit your job. We're gonna drill into the details of what to look for, even if it's not near a lake and some other things like that. And you mentioned another one. You're dropping all these amazing hints and breadcrumbs here, like near a major city. That where people want to get away from. Could just pick a major city. Could be Dallas. Could be Atlanta. Could be Chicago. Like a major population area where people need to get within an hour and a half. So you're not like driving like 6 hours. That's quite the time commitment. But most people can going 6 miles an hour, that's an hour and a half away. You feel like you're out of the major metro area. It's fun. It's refreshing. Um, what you just spoke to it, just to make a real life lesson here. You mentioned the bad or the kind of the negative attributes of that first property, but what did it have? Why is it generating such amazing revenue? Because I want people to learn that. Like, oh, it's not near a lake, out. It's not new enough, out. It's like not like all the knots. But what does it have? What should be people looking for? And again, that's a large question, but what
yeah,
did you find for this one?
yeah. So the big thing is, it was an experience in of itself, where yes, they can go to the beaches for the day and come back, but they're not going to be bored when they're at the property. Again, it had a sauna, a hot tub. We converted the 2-stall oversized garage into a fun room. It had basketball, ping pong, just all kinds of fun stuff to do. And then again, the best fire pit in Michigan. I mean, 8-foot bear sculptures carved out of trees, and that kind of stuff. So custom carved benches and all that stuff. So just a really unique property where people can go. And it was 2.5 acres. So it's like they aren't, there isn't neighbors right next door, and they could kind of let loose and have a little bit of fun. And yeah, it was just a fun place.
That's amazing, man. And then, so I want people to have a sense of creativity and insight. So we want to like seed this conversation with these ideas, these insights that you have, that you've
Yeah.
learned, your team has learned, and because there's so many things we can just check off the boxes for, and say, oh no, none of this fits my criteria. But with the right, with inspiration, there may be some value to be unlocked with the right amenities, with the right view, with the right vision. Like that's really, really exciting where people like, oh, maybe everyone's passed this or that property by, but there's real value to be, to be unlocked.
Yeah, and the hard part is, like, obviously, who doesn't want to be on the water, right? A river or a lake. The problem is you almost double the price of the property by doing that.
That
So
was my next question. It's like, what is like equivalent, roughly equivalent property that's on the water being rented for? And like you just said, like, is that true? Like, so nearly double then what you found?
so we do manage one on the water. It does very, very, very well. But what it would cost to acquire that property, it would not make sense as an investment. It is the homeowners, it's their fun place. They like to go there. They like to spend time there. You know, they block off the most expensive week of the year to go there with family. They don't care. So they just like to offset a little bit of the expenses with some revenue. And even with blocking off and not accepting every reservation, they still just crush it. But again, it just wouldn't make sense at the purchase price. So here in Michigan, I would say if you're going to buy a place, even not on the big lake is you're going to pay $1.5 million for the lower end and up, and you'll probably get anywhere from, call it 175 up in terms of rents for that property. Smaller lakes, you're going to get less in rent, and then it'll probably be at least double the price of a property that's not on the lake.
Right.
So again, if you can get, I mean, we just started managing some properties this year that have a pool. If you can find a cool place that has a pool, a hot tub, those kind of things, people love it. We listed a place at the end of July, and I think we got 14 bookings in 7 days or 10 days, something like that. So if you can find a pool, even though it's in Michigan, the good news is you won't have the pool expense for 8 months out of the year because it's only open for 4 months, but you'll drive a lot of revenue. You're probably going to drive 70% of your revenue in 3 months alone.
That's amazing. That's really, really good insight. Very good insight here. Did you have I guess, well, let me turn that into a question now. I was thinking, you talked about how you looked kind of in all the normal spots. You had your kind of your buy box and you looked in your own backyard and just kind of, you kind of uncovered it, unlocked. Did you, when you first kind of grabbed that or saw that first opportunity, Tony, did you see yourself exiting? Did you want to do that, or did it just kind of happen kind of organically? And like you said, you were the next guy up there.
Did I want to exit? Yeah. So technically I was in a spot for 12 years in manufacturing. I tried to make the leap once, doing something else, ended up having to go back. So naturally you make it back into manufacturing. So it was kind of an industry that I was no longer like having fun in. So and once you get that little taste of owning your own business and kind of operating on your own terms, it's a hard thing to go back to.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Could you share? I know this is probably proprietary information. Can you share your buy box? That you've mentioned 3 or 4 things already here, but again, just to kind of give a bullet point of like how are you looking and finding what do you look for, and then of course when it fits those things, then like what are the next steps there after you do find something that fits check 90% of the boxes that you have.
Yeah, I can actually share a calculator that we built out for other
Amazing.
people. We get that question a lot. And so we're like, you know what? We're going to build a calculator that grades a property based on the way that we look at it. And that's all it is how we look at it. Somebody else might look at it different and say, hey, this is a great property. But the first thing we look for is, again, prices have gone up. Interest rates have gone up. So it's a lot more expensive these days to own a property. So what we like to do first thing is, hey, that property should project out in revenue 33% of the purchase price. So if it's $300,000, we want to see it close in projected rents $100,000. And that's just going to be our rough, like, hey, how close is it? Should we continue on with it? But if we find something that's like, hey, 10%, it's only, it's 300,000 and it's projected to do 30,000, we're just going to walk away and not even continue looking any further. But nowadays it's like, hey, we kind of found our sweet spot. We're not really looking to buy outside of, the Saugatuck down to New Buffalo area. So we're really familiar with that and confident in what it can produce. But after that, it's like, hey, is it unique? Does it have the opportunity to be unique? If you're looking to just kind of buy a standard home in a standard subdivision, and if you're going to do mediocre design and not have fun stuff to do, then it's probably not going to work out for you. So you just really want to make sure that property can be, again, an experience in itself, and be kind of a place where people can go. Otherwise, you're just competing with hotels.
Yeah, for sure. What I've been told this by some other operators in my area, which is Minneapolis, Minnesota, this region. Yes, a lot of lakes here, so there's some similarities to Michigan. Are you targeting larger bedroom counts, like 3 and above or 4 and above, or is that something else within the criteria?
So for what we want to manage and own, we want those properties that are going to do over $100,000 a year in rent. So those almost always have to be larger bedroom counts for it to make sense. But if that wasn't my objective, if somebody else said, "Hey, I got a smaller budget and I want to get started," 1 bed, 2 bed. The good thing about those, during the off season, and again, we have a pretty big off season here in Michigan, you can do a lot of midterm rentals. And I was just talking to somebody this morning. We get a lot of midterm rentals, but a lot of times it's 1 or 2 people looking to either come for, maybe they're a nurse looking to work at a hospital, or a contractor working to work, but it's almost always 1 or 2 people. So if you have a 6 bedroom, it's gonna be really hard for it to make sense renting it out to someone that only needs 1 or 2 beds.
Absolutely, for
So
sure, for
it
sure.
can definitely work. The smaller ones can definitely work for people where that kind of fits what they're looking to do in their budget.
Right, for sure. Um, what how you discussed the kind of you're starting to manage other people's properties. Is that something that was part of you kind of incorporated is in the growth of the company? Did you kind of want to do that? And so I have 3 questions here. And then do you see yourself doing more of that and just kind of baking all that cost into the ones that you own and manage?
Yeah, we love managing. We love, again, we're looking to manage properties that do 100,000 in revenue or higher. So we're looking to manage more of those premium type properties. Um, and what was the other question?
Was that part of did you, I guess, intentionally go there? So first it was kind of like, own and manage. And then as you were discussing, you share like, hey, we're actually managing a few others, like that one family that has the lakefront property, very high end, beautiful, very expensive. You're managing that for people. Is that something that you kind of wanted to grow into? And do you see that actually, adding revenue, probably because your efficient processes that are already existing, and you can just like streamline that? Was that
Yeah,
part of the business growth too?
absolutely. Because most investors, their biggest constraint is capital, right? I mean, we can't go buy 30 properties quickly that can do that kind of revenue. So we knew that managing other people's property was going to be a big part of growing the business.
For sure. And if you don't mind sharing, what is the management fee? I've asked multiple managers here in Minneapolis. I'm about to rent out my own home, or at least part of it, and other students that I have here that I help coach. Some are doing multifamily, some are doing Airbnb. What is
Yeah,
a typical what rate are you charging up there in
yeah,
Michigan?
yeah. So we charge 20% on the nightly rate.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know it can go all the way. I've heard of bigger companies, maybe one of the big 3 in the United States, property vacation rental property managers charging upwards of 34%.
Yeah.
I also have heard of down in Florida, I think it can go lower to like 12 to 15%. So we're kind of right in the middle there. I would say Michigan, it's probably averages 20 to 25%.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's awesome. So I love that insight which I didn't even think of. It was like, yes, like you're going to be limited to your capital, how much capital you could deploy to buy your own properties, but how could you grow the revenue of the business? And like you said, you can take on other properties and get that cut. What tools have you found to be the most instrumental, or maybe just like mainly online tools, Tony? What are some of your favorites? That's something else people always want to know. Like, oh, using AirDNA or
Yeah.
these other platforms. What are some of your go-to tech tools?
Yeah, so AirDNA, what we use for like the rough projection initially. Again, when we get to that 33% rule of the purchase price, that's the tool we're using to just get a rough gauge on whether that makes sense or not. But AirDNA, or not AirDNA, Price Labs is a big one for us. It's something we use right out of the get-go. And like I said, when we started, we were like, hey, if we can get $500, we're going to be to the moon. but we would have never guessed we could get $1,000 a night for that property. Or, definitely there's no way we would have ever set it at 1650. So without like a dynamic pricing tool, we would have left a lot of money on the table.
Oh, it's
So
amazing.
there's
That's
that.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one, I mean, just a good property management software. So we use OwnerRez right now. Don't love the user interface. Just looks like it's maybe from 10 years ago and hasn't been updated. Once you get familiar, we tried it and then left it and then came back to it. But once you get used to it, you really start to like it, and it has a lot of power to it. So yeah.
Okay, those are your
And then
go-tos.
Rank Breeze is a good one. So that's something that we use to just kind of track our properties where they fall in the Airbnb like ranking. Hey, it's like Google, right? If you're on page 5, nobody's going to page 5 of Google. So Rank Breeze actually will show you where you rank inside of the Airbnb platform. So whether you're on page 1, position 1, or if we've taken properties that were on page 8 and brought them all the way up to first page, top 5 listing, and that's where you want to be. Is you want to be in those top 5 listings. So
awesome, man. And can you shed insight on how does one boost their ratings on the platform? Is it just all digital like trickery, or is it like actual just like hard work and like just doing a good job, or is it a combination?
yeah, it's a lot of testing stuff. So there sometimes it's like you'll just tweak the title of the property, right? And I was looking at one the other day, and they were talking about winter in the summer. It's like, you got to get, like, nobody's looking, especially in Michigan, nobody's looking to rent a winter retreat in the summer. So you got to get rid of that. A lot of times it's photos, like people can have like squares, or there's one I was working with the other day, they had 6 pictures as their cover photo, and it's like, well, most people are on their iPhone and it's super small to see. So
Right. This collage is like, what is this like
yeah,
micro grid
right.
thing here, right?
Yeah, so sometimes it's getting better photos, switching out the photos, changing the description, and just adding more keywords. Again, it is a searching a place that you can search for. And then a lot of times it's like, I've seen so many people just leave off a ton of amenities that they have. You're like, okay, you don't have any smoke alarms in that entire place. Okay, I don't believe that. Or you forgot to click your fridge as an amenity. Like, you want to make sure you have all your amenities checked, all that stuff. So and then pricing obviously is a big one too. So if you're trying to get $1,000 a night and everybody else is at 500, and that's where like Rank Breeze will show you, hey, the top 10 positions, this is their pricing per night. How does yours stack up to that? Like, then make that adjustment. And a lot of times pricing will give you a big boost too.
For sure. No, that's amazing. Well, cool, man. This has been an amazing episode of knowledge and sharing, and kind of used your journey as well. If someone was to get into if they're kind of fall, and there's a lot of people that have a dream, have a vision, are talking about it. If they were to follow what you did, what would you like? Hey, hey, come in here, let's have a cup of coffee. What are like the 5 things they should consider as they're in their full-time job, and then kind of the steps to perhaps exiting and going full-time into the SDR business, which is what you're doing. You have management, you have multiple properties, you have partners. Give us the 5, 6, 7, whatever steps you'd kind of like go through to guide someone.
Yeah, step number 1 is be patient. I've seen a lot of people.
Patience.
Some people that have wanted to work with me and like, hey, I want a property, and I'm just not sending them properties fast enough, and they just want to get in the game. And it's like, well, there's a reason. It's because, especially what I like about the Southwest Michigan market, is not a lot of properties come out. So you just can't go in there and buy 5 properties today and make them a short-term rental, right? So it can be tough if you want to get into that market, but it's great from a competition standpoint that it's not going to get oversaturated. So 1, be ready to be patient. Number 2, again, be conservative, over project on your expenses and maybe under project on the revenue. AirDNA, I think, focuses a lot on previous years, and we are coming off a couple of the biggest years here in terms of rents. COVID, people just went gangbusters on the short-term rentals. I mean, there's still a huge demand for it. There is more properties out there though. 3, I mean, I guess I would go look back at what we did and say, hey, get out of the mindset of I need to be where everybody else is.
Yeah.
Panama City Beach, Gatlinburg, Orlando, Florida, that kind of stuff. It's like that's a tough place, and the competition is really steep. Over
Yes.
here, in our market, you can still see like the marketing, the pictures, the design, decor. It's still like probably 5 years behind where Gatlinburg is. So, you can really stand out pretty easy in this market. And
Yeah.
we have a client that they have a design background and they just crush it. So, number four, I mean, I think you gotta build up the bankroll, right? I mean, that might be more at the first part, but it's not a cheap asset class that you can get into
Yeah.
because when you buy it, you can do a 10% down loan. But you got to get the furnishings, but you also have to make sure that don't skip on the furnishings and design, hire the designer, don't take your own photography, that kind of stuff. Especially if you don't have a background in that. But if you're not going to put your best foot forward in design, then you might as well not even be in it. But I would say you're going to spend at least 70 to 100 to get into short-term rentals, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Again, asset prices are just so high right now.
Do you think partnerships are key, or do you maybe you've seen it go both ways, but do you think there's an extra strength if you have partners? That's a real question, a genuine question. Like I don't know,
Yeah,
I could see it go
yeah.
either way. I don't know.
I am Mr. Conservative, and like I said, if it was just me on that first one, I would have said, after the inspection, I would have said no. Everybody else, was gung ho about it, and so we decided to go with it. But I'll always find a reason not to do a deal. My business partner is a little more on the optimistic side, so we
Yeah.
balance each other out, each other out nicely. And then in terms of capital, like we have, there's three of us that have partnered on it. So anytime we can get three people together that all have some good, call it cash ready to deploy, it makes it easier to buy properties or capitalize on an opportunity when it comes by. So I would
Yeah.
say yes. You just got to make, my partners are probably a couple of the best business partners you could ask for. So, but I've heard of some terrible stories with business partners as well. So you just got to make sure who they are. We're all friends from like 15 years. So it's an easy relationship to manage.
Yeah. And one other thing that you didn't mention it, but you kind of were hinting at, was the spreading of risk. If I cut a check for 100K, whatever it is, I mean, to most people that's a lot of money,
Yeah.
But maybe everyone chips in, 33,000 or whatever. Maybe you do have 100,000, but then you only deploy a third of it. And if that property goes down or there's some other unforeseen, yeah, it's very unfortunate and it hits you, but not quite the impact that could take you out versus spreading that risk around to multiple
Right.
people, multiple people's resources, really, what that is. Their businesses, their connections, their bank account, things like that. So your longevity and your ability to withstand tough things increases, at least in my opinion, with some solid partners.
Absolutely. And then the last thing I would say is just be ready for the valley of despair on short-term rentals, because you're gung ho, you're excited about it. We did a whole podcast about it, but everybody gets super excited, right? Hey, I got it under contract. And once the work begins, once you have to start doing some, you almost always have to put in some work, some paint, some flooring, whatever. You got to put the work in. That's going to cost money. And then you got to start outfitting this entire property. It doesn't have a napkin. You got to outfit it for multiple call it guests, right? Some are going to be all friends, some are going to have babies, and they're going to need pack and play and that kind of stuff. So you have to equip it for a lot of different types of people, and it's expensive. And you're like, when is the spending going to stop?
Yeah, when are you gonna stop swiping the credit card to Amazon or whatever it
Right,
is? Like stop, and then you're
right,
like, but we
right.
need you might need the crib or you might need that high chair, right, or whatever it is.
Yep. And just when you think you're done, there's probably another 5 to 10,000 to go. And so there's just part of it where you're like, dude, is this ever going to end? And so the biggest thing is just be ready for that, mentally. And I know our first one, again, we closed in, I think, June 15th, and we're like, okay, we got to get it turned around ready for July 4th. And that was incredibly difficult. And looking back, you almost need the deadline to get it done, otherwise it drags
Yeah.
out.
Yes.
But there was a lot of stress and involved in that. So just be ready, because and no matter how many times you do it, it's always the same. Oh my gosh, is it almost done? So.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic place to wrap up the show, Tony, with all those, that list of things. That last section was really, really helpful. Kind of, again, bullet pointed, crystallized all the things you talked about and gave a lot of insight and shared your story, of course. So, what's the best way for people to book a room or a place with you and to learn more about what you do? I know you have a podcast, and clearly you have properties, and I want people to go there if they're traveling into Michigan. What's drop some good contacts there if you would, please.
Yeah, so the best place to connect with me personally is LinkedIn, Tony Stancato on LinkedIn. Probably be in the show notes. If you want to book a property, you can go to michiganshorttermrentals.com. We have all our properties on there. Our property management company, also Book and Gather, has those listed. But our podcast is Michigan Short-Term Rentals, so that's kind of the content side. And we do share all the properties on the Michigan Short-Term Rentals website.
Amazing. Well, that's all for now, folks. We thank you for listening to another episode of the Investing Stuff You Should Know podcast, where we can bring you amazing guests like Tony and others, and they share a lot of knowledge and a lot of, we certainly appreciate their time. So until next time, Tony, thank you.
Thanks for having me on.